They didn't just leave the buildings, they left entire towns. Imagine waking up one morning, and by nightfall, your entire city, the streets, the schools, the churches, the homes, is simply gone. Not destroyed, not burned, just abandoned, left to rot. And the government that built it all, they just walked away. That's exactly what happened across America, and most people have absolutely no idea these places even exist. Fort Ord in California was once home to over 50,000 soldiers and their families. There were barbershops, bowling alleys, movie theaters, churches, and schools. Kids rode their bikes down perfectly paved streets. Families grilled in their backyards. It looked like any other American town, except it was built entirely by the United States Army. Then, in 1994, the base closed, and almost overnight, one of the most populated military communities in the country became a ghost town. Today, if you walk through what's left of Fort Ord, you'll find buildings with their doors still wide open, furniture rotting inside old barracks, paint peeling off walls that once held up family photos, nature slowly consuming everything the Army left behind. But here's where it gets even darker. Fort Ord sits on top of one of the largest Superfund toxic waste sites in the entire country. Decades of military training left the ground soaked in unexploded ordnance and hazardous chemicals. The government didn't just abandon the town, they abandoned it poisoned. And Fort Ord isn't alone, not even close. Across the United States, there are dozens of these forgotten military communities, places that were built fast, lived in hard, and then simply discarded when they were no longer useful to the war machine. Some of them are in the middle of deserts, some are buried deep in forests, some are right on the edges of major cities, hidden in plain sight, slowly disappearing behind chain-link fences and no trespassing signs. Take Adak Island in Alaska. The U.S. Navy built an entire self-sufficient town on this remote island in the Aleutian Chain during World War II, expanded it massively during the Cold War, and at its peak housed over 6,000 people. There was a mall, a McDonald's, a bowling alley, schools, a hospital, a movie theater. In the middle of one of the most remote, wind-battered places on the planet, the United States government built a fully functioning American suburb. And then, in 1997, they just left. Almost everything is still there, rusting, crumbling, the cold Alaskan wind howling through buildings that once buzzed with life. The island's current civilian population, fewer than 200 people. The rest of the town is just sitting there, waiting. Or consider Loring Air Force Base in Maine. At the height of the Cold War, Loring was one of the most strategically important military installations in the world. It was home to nuclear-armed B-52 bombers, sitting on the front line of a potential Soviet attack across the North Atlantic. Thousands of airmen and their families lived there. And when the Cold War ended and the base closed in 1994, the government packed up and moved on. What was left behind was a town-sized installation with housing units, administrative buildings, a hospital, and infrastructure stretching across thousands of acres. Local communities have spent decades trying to repurpose what the military left, but the scale of the abandonment is staggering. You don't just rebuild your economy overnight when your entire town was built around a single military mission that no longer exists. This is one of the most overlooked consequences of America's military history, the human wreckage left behind when bases close. And it's not just about empty buildings. It's about the communities that built their entire identity around these installations, the local businesses that survived on military paychecks, the schools that educated military kids, the neighborhoods that formed around shared sacrifice. When the government decided the base was no longer needed, all of that disappeared too. Not with a bang, just a slow, grinding collapse. And then there are the ones the government really doesn't want you to know about, the installations that weren't just abandoned, they were erased. Pine Castle Air Force Base in Florida was used in the 1950s and 60s for aerial bombing practice. When it closed, the government didn't fully clean it up. Unexploded bombs are still being found in what is now part of the Ocala National Forest. People hike through those woods today without knowing what's buried beneath their feet. In Jefferson Proving Ground in Indiana, the Army tested everything from artillery shells to rockets for decades. When they closed it in 1995, they acknowledged they simply could not safely clean up the ordnance left behind. So they fenced it off. Hundreds of thousands of acres of American land permanently off limits because it's too dangerous to reclaim. The pattern is always the same. The military needs something: land, location, manpower, and so they build. They build fast and they build big, because that's what war demands. Entire towns spring up from nothing in a matter of months. And then when the need disappears, when the war ends, when the strategy shifts, when the budget gets cut, they leave. And the land, the buildings, the contamination, the cost of cleanup, that becomes someone else's problem. Usually the taxpayers, usually the local communities, usually the people who had the least say in any of it. What makes the story even more haunting is how many of these places are physically beautiful. Fort Ord sits along the stunning Monterey Peninsula, Adak Island is surrounded by raw, breathtaking Alaskan wilderness. Some of these abandoned bases have incredible architecture, mid-century buildings with bold design, built to last, now quietly falling apart because no one has the funding or the will to restore them. Photographers and urban explorers who have managed to get inside describe walking through time capsules, offices with papers still on the desks, gyms with equipment still in place, chapels with pews still lined up in perfect rows. These places aren't just ruins, they're frozen moments in American history. And they raise a question that nobody in power seems eager to answer. When a government builds a town, invites people to live in it, builds an entire community around a military mission, and then walks away, what is the obligation to the people left behind? What is the obligation to the land, to the environment, to future generations who might want to use that space? The law says the military has to clean up environmental contamination before transferring land. The reality is that cleanup timelines stretch for decades, costs balloon into the billions, and in some cases the government has simply decided that full remediation is impossible. So they fence it off and move on. There are hundreds of these places across the country. Some are slowly being redeveloped. Fort Ord now hosts California State University Monterey Bay, and parts of it have been converted into housing and parks. Some are being used for new purposes, their military past slowly fading into the background. But many are simply sitting there, year after year, decade after decade. Fences rusting, buildings collapsing, the toxic legacy seeping deeper into the groundwater. America's forgotten military towns, left behind like equipment that outlived its usefulness. The United States has the most powerful military in the history of the world. It has spent more on defense than the next 10 countries combined. And yet scattered across this country are dozens of places where that same military built entire communities, asked people to sacrifice for their country, and then simply walked away when the mission changed. They didn't just leave the buildings. They left the people who believed in them. If this kind of story is what you come here for, the hidden history, the forgotten places, the things nobody talks about, hit subscribe, because there's so much more where this came from, and you don't want to miss what's coming next.